Hey, thanks for turning into Down the Mine Shaft with Triz. That's me, Triz. I guess I'll kind of go through what this whole thing is, or what my intentions are with doing this. For many years, friends and family have always, for one reason or another, have been amused with my points on certain subjects and knowledge on some things. So they've always bugged me to put something together. So that's what I'm going to do here. Try to do it weekly. We'll do it live stream eventually and get set up for it and have some guests in and try to make it funny. I'm doing it for fun. And I'm not naive to the fact that the podcast industry or market is very much so saturated. So I don't have these grand illusions that I'm going to make a ton of money doing this. But, leave a comment if you like it. I'll keep doing them. If not, I won't. I've got a few topics I'd like to talk about today. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a history music guy. So I guess we can start with music. There's going to be a few people probably rolling their eyes. They know what I'm going to say already, but I do not understand why the band Led Zeppelin gets the pass they get. Granted, how many people are listening to Led Zeppelin these days? But even guys like a little bit older, guys that kind of grew up in the 70s, like the Foghat, Molly Hatchet, Leonard Skinner guys, not the Metallica, Guns N' Roses guys, a little bit older. Those guys they don't care that Led Zeppelin are the biggest thieves in music history. It's like the world's most successful cover band. And I guess I think it's because they grew up with it. It's nostalgic. They don't care. But as a musician, I do. Try to write a song one time. You figure out it's not easy. It's not easy to write a song. And the fact that they blatantly stole all these songs from old Delta blues guys and never gave them any credit. And I don't know if it's fact or not, but I had read somewhere that so when you have a music catalog, it has to mature. It has to kind of like a 401k. It has to sit so many years before you can sell it off. And it's sort of suspicious that Led Zeppelin, as soon as theirs became eligible, they sold theirs off. I suspect that they knew there were lawsuits coming. The latest lawsuit was for, I believe, Stairway to Heaven. I think Rolling Stone called it the number one rock song of all time. And a band called Spirit. I think the band's called Spirit, and the song's called Taurus. If you listen to the beginning riff of that is Stairway to Heaven. There's no doubt about it. That's Stairway to Heaven. Led Zeppelin won the case, but I think there's more to it. I think they may have settled out of court at some point because it's a blatant ripoff. But I also remember reading somewhere that there was only one song that Zeppelin did that actually became a hit that they actually wrote. And I don't even know why they had to steal music. I mean, they were a talented band. I mean, John Bonham, Jimmy Page, these guys didn't need to steal like they did. So I'm going to put a graphic on the screen so you can kind of follow along with me. So in 69, we have Dazed and Confused. To the right there, under author, Jake Holmes. So they settled for that. Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You in 69. and Breeden, they settled for that. How many more times? 69. How many more times are they going to get sued in 69? Jesus. They settled for that. Black Mountainside, Bert Jansch, legal action considered, never taken because of cost. So he probably could have won. He just didn't have the money. Your time is going to come. No action taken. I mean, read the list of these songs. These are Whole Lot of Love, The Lemon Song, Moby Dick, Stairway to Heaven, Custard Pie, Boogie with Stu. Dude, these guys stole everything. Every freaking song these guys had, they stole. I believe I read also that Jimmy Page, because he was in the Yardbirds before he joined Zeppelin, he actually had a song with them that he brought over, changed slightly, and used with Zeppelin, which is, I don't really mind that as much. I mean, it's his song. I mean, it's probably the only song they had a hit with. But so the first year the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame opens, they're inducted. And why it bugs me, too, is I spent all of my adolescence arguing with guys in school about who was better, Black Sabbath or Led Zeppelin. And now looking back, to find out they were thieves and that I truly won the argument, makes me a bit happy. You know who you are, by the way. But yeah, I can't believe these guys get a pass like this. Like, you never hear anybody talk about Led Zeppelin, they come on the radio, it's, oh, dude, turn that up. They're thieves. Which brings me to the next topic. I'm curious where music goes now with this AI being so prevalent and everything. So, somebody asked me, like, if I liked AI artwork. And while, yes, it's good, but I don't give it any value because it didn't take any time to do. The computer created it. But then I was thinking, what if you had a machine that would gently whittle away wood, or a stone carving machine, but it was powered by AI. And AI, over the time of 18 hours, 28 hours, took some time, made you the most badass looking statue or figure that you've ever seen, like Michelangelo worthy. Would you still give that any value? What's the difference? I don't know. I personally still wouldn't give a value. The problem is not only with art are you able to do this, but you're able to do it with music. I used to write some poetry back when I was younger, and recently I took one of my poems and threw it into ChatGPT, and I said, okay, I gave it commands. I wanted a country song, male voice, make it like a outlaw mountain type sounding country song, kind of like Chris Stapleton. And within a minute, it kicked out a song. I'll play that song at the end of the show, so you can listen to it. It's not bad. It's not bad. I mean, it's kind of amazing, really, what AI is doing. And you have to wonder, so what effect is this going to have on music? At some point, we will have a pop hit where we will find out is AI. We may even have a celebrity that we find out is AI, like Max Headroom, for those of you that grew up in the 80s. So where does it go then? I mean, my prediction is the internet, how it's becoming, it's like spiraling out exponentially, right? So it's getting so vast that, you can't even find unbiased news or opinions anymore. It's all tracking and curtailed to your habits and stuff. At some point, I think people are going to start shying away from the internet because you don't know if anything's real. It's just going to be this conglomeration of crap, and we'll probably still use it to be stay connected as far as systems and stuff like that. But I wonder if like 40 years from now, so most things as they progress, if I'll use rock and roll for instance, started with Elvis. Well, basically started with Elvis. Elvis brought black music to white people, and every decade, if you look, the music got a little harder and harder and harder, till it got to the point till now. It can't get any harder. I mean, search up any death metal music, and the drums are going so fast. It's the singing is Cookie Monster growling, squealing like pigs. You can't get any harder than that. It's like with hip hop. Hip hop started, Sugar Hill Gang, and it was kind of innocent sounding. Rakim, LL Cool J, and then in the very late '80s, you had NWA come with the album "Fuck the Police." That's the name of the album. The stuff that's out there now makes NWA sound soft. I mean, now the thing is, you used to be able to have a tattoo. The sailors would have a tattoo on their forearm or something. And that was, they were badass. Then you'd get a tattoo on your arm. Then you get sleeves. Then it went to the neck. Now it's the face, right? So you tattoo your face, got gold teeth, and if you listen to any of the Chicago trail music, it's literally about pointing guns at a camera and talking about who you're with, what you're about, what you have, and who you're going to kill if they cross you or disrespect you. There's nowhere else to go for it. There's just nowhere else to go for a lot of this stuff. It's my TV theory, right? So TVs for a while were in competition on when they started getting flat screens, plasmas and stuff. It was definition, right? And 720, 1080. But the manufacturers knew that the human eye can only see so good. So there was a brick wall there that they knew they were going to hit. So then they started focused on getting them thinner, 3D, concave. It's like that with music and art. I don't know where we're gonna go from here. I'll say this: I'm so happy that I lived when I did, and I haven't. I'm not being born now to live in the future, because it's. And I probably sound like, I'm no spring chicken. Get off my grass. Remember when? I'm not that guy. I still will listen to new music. If it's good, it's good. I can hear good music, whether it's new or not. I'll hear a new song or something, and I'll do a little research and see who wrote it. I just give more credit to. It's like somebody like Britney Spears. You have a team of writers, or hired writers, subcontracted writers. They hand in what they think is going to be a hit. She takes it to the studio, kicks out a song, and it becomes a hit. Then you have a guy like, Bruno Mars. Like him or not, he writes almost all his own stuff. That goes a long ways with me. It's writing your own music. But you can still find good music out there nowadays. It's just far and few between. And every time one of my kids shows me a song, I don't like it or I don't get it, I just remember it's not written for me. They're not aiming for me as their audience. So I give them a little slack there. So it kind of just came to me last minute. So for most of my adult career, I've been in the multifamily housing industry. Started out as a groundskeeper. I was about 18, and eventually became a maintenance supervisor. And I would work at condos and apartment complexes. And through that time, for one reason or another, I had come across seeing a lot of dead people, a lot of corpses, to a point where I was the guy that they would get. You know, if you haven't heard from, Aunt Betsy for a few days, you'd call from Ohio, you'd call down to Orlando, Florida, and say, hey, my aunt lives there. Haven't heard from her for a week. Can you guys check on her? It's called a wellness check. Naturally, they'd, go get Triz. And so I kind of put myself in that position to see many of them. But just want to talk a bit about, I believe I've seen 14. I found 14 bodies. Some of them stayed with me. I mean, I've had to deal with them. I mean, when you smell that much death, it sticks to you. It's a sweet smell you never forget. There was a few times that I would come home from work and my wife would tell me, you gotta take that shirt off. I can smell it. It just permeates everything. So if I'm trying to put them in order, I can't remember which one's my first. But this one time I was working at an apartment complex, and I had a work order to fix a doorknob or something, and I went to this kid's apartment, and he was a college student, and I walked in his bedroom, and he was hunched over, like in a kind of he was Muslim and praying, right? Like that kind of posture. And there was a book sitting in front of him. So he was kind of like hunched over, and then there was like a book sitting right there in front of him. And I picked up the book and looked at it, and it was How to Kill Yourself. And the page he was turned to was shooting yourself in the stomach. And that's what he did. He had the gun like that and shot himself. It went through his stomach, out his back. It went through the ceiling and through the roof. I found that bullet 2 months later while I was cleaning the pool in the back of the property. I was vacuuming it up, and when I went to clean out the filter, there was a piece of lead, a mushroomed lead piece, and it was a bullet from that kid. I still have it somewhere. One time I got to work, and I was just doing grounds, and I saw a pair of glasses laying on the sidewalk, and then my eye caught a pink color in the bushes, and I looked, and there was a girl kind of upside down laying in the bushes. I guess she came home she was a young girl, very young, 16, 17. She had a fake ID, and she went to the bar with some friends, went home. Her roommate wasn't home. Her roommate stayed with a boyfriend or something, and she decided to go out on her balcony and sit up on the ledge, and she misjudged it and fell over and must have hit her head on the way down or something. There's a few I have found that were natural deaths, heart attacks. I used to see this lady all the time. She was in her 30s at the time at the mailbox. I forget her name, but I used to wave to her all the time. And one day I was doing grounds again. I was walking around her building, and I had saw her on the floor. And I kind of peeked in, and then I was like, oh, I thought she was sleeping. It's like, oh. So I just kept going. And about a week later, I'm doing the same thing right in front of that building. And she was sitting there again, same spot. And something told me, like, no, it just looked too, I don't know, it was just too the same. And I went and pulled the key, and I went in there, and her living room was littered with beer cans and like the big vodka, like Fleischmann's vodka. I don't know if it's a liter, a gallon, whatever. It's a big bottle, cheap. And she was laying on a pillow, her eyes were open, and she had blood coming out of her ear. And it turns out she had just gotten out of rehab for alcoholism. And she let it rip, fell off the wagon, and the medical examiner, I forget what he said exactly, but I think she had catastrophic liver failure or something, because she was puking up bile. When I looked throughout the house, I could tell that she vomited in the toilet. And then it looked like she tried to lay down for a little bit, because you could see like drops of liquids. And so she probably laid down a little bit. Room started spinning. So she decided to go out in the living room and lay by the TV. And that's where she died. And typically we wouldn't, the cops and coroners deal with that. But this particular instance, my boss, she asked, because she had talked to the parents on the phone. And she said, hey, can you, after the body was removed, she said, can you go try to make that, the stains and the pillow, blood-soaked pillow, can you make that disappear so the parents don't have to see that? So I did, and I'll never forget being on a golf cart, holding a bucket full of puke, piss, and bile, sloshing around with a bloody pillow stuffed in it on the way to the dumpster. This one kid I found one time, he had asked me to put a new vanity bulb in his mirror. He was a young kid. He was 16. Went to the local high school here in Orlando. I was real busy that week. I said I can do it next week, maybe as soon as I get a chance. And this was like on a Monday. On a Friday, I clocked out. I was on my way home. I had lived on this property as well. I remember I saw a light bulb, and I was like, oh, let me just run by there real quick. So I went up there and knocked. Nothing. Knocked. Nothing. Went and grabbed the key. Opened the door. Said maintenance. Nothing. So as I went into the bathroom, when I went to open the bathroom door, the door hit something. Like there was something in the way. So I reached in there and turned on the key. I turned on the switch, the light switch, and I looked in there and I could see legs. So then I pushed it real hard, kind of pushed it over, and I peeked my head in there, and it just smelled like metal and copper. That's what I remember. And there was stuff all over I'm not going to get graphic, stuff all over the walls. And he was missing his head, entirely missing his head. And he had a shotgun, double-barrel shotgun, laying on his side. He lived with his dad. His mom had died of cancer some years back, but he lived with his dad. And 3 weeks later, almost to the day, we were doing a pest control thing where I would have to walk with pest control guys to make sure there was a member of staff there when they entered an apartment. And as soon as we opened that door, I was just telling a pest control guy, like, dude, I found a young kid shot himself. It turns out he shot himself over a girlfriend, by the way, which is a shame. So young. The father was hanging by a belt from the ceiling fan. The ceiling fan was turned off and he was hanging. And I later joked, like, I don't think I installed that ceiling fan because ceiling fan, because there's no way that thing would have held a grown man if I would have put it up. But yeah, he killed himself. He left this badass Harley V-Rod motorcycle sitting in the parking lot for months, and I did everything I could to try to get that, but it turns out you just can't assume property like that. It goes back to the whoever owns it, the dealership or whatever. But yeah, I found a lot of dead bodies, man. They all got a story too. I found a lot of dead bodies. And it sounds morbid, it sounds gruesome, but when you talk about it, it helps a bit. It doesn't bother me too much anymore. Used to have a friend of mine, great friend, Dennis. He was a firefighter. was having a beer with him one time, and I asked him, because he had told me, not in detail, but he had said that he had had a rough call that week. Those first responders, man, hats off to you, because they pull up on horrific child abuse and just animal abuse. And he had a rough one that had something to do with a young child. And around that time, I had just found another body. I found a lady. She was a hoarder. I'll get back to her in a minute. And I asked Dennis, I said, how do you deal with that? Like, how do you, and he said, I have a quarter, just a normal U.S. quarter. Keep it in my pocket. When I pull my driveway, I put it in the glove compartment or the ashtray or glove box, whatever. And that's where it all stays. The next day when I go to work, I pick it up and I put it back in my pocket. And I don't know if that's a healthy or correct way of dealing with it, but it helped me. I left it. I never brought it home, except for all the stuff I would find, like my badass drum kit, Pearl Export Series with a rack. I got that from a kid. Well, let me get back to the first one. The hoarder. I had talked to her 2 days before I found her dead. She was said that she was going to the doctor, wasn't feeling well. She was addicted to the Home Shopping Network. And when you walked in this lady's house, her name was Mrs. Bishop, you couldn't move. There was a thin little clearance that you had to kind of shimmy sideways. And it was her and her dog. And I asked her one time, I was just kind of like, don't you ever cook? Because you couldn't see her stove. It was buried. And she said, no, I started ordering out, and then one thing led to the other, and now I can't get to the stove. So, but it was weird. Like everything was organized. There was a gigantic pile of Arizona iced tea, empty jugs. I have a picture of her house. I'll post it. But I had went there to check on her because of a wellness call, and it was dark, dingy, and she was a chain smoker. Like, so she would light a cigarette in the living room, have one burning in the bathroom, have one burning in the kitchen. And the fridge you see here, this is what you're seeing is a fridge that I had taken the magnets off of it. That's how bad nicotine stained it was. And look at this ceiling fan. This was her house. That's incredible. I had gotten into there and it was very dark and I couldn't move around, and I just remember calling for her, and I turned around and she was dead on the couch, and it scared the crap out of me because she had been dead for a couple days and her cheeks were sunken. I called around for her dog, and I found him, her, I forget what it was, dead as well. And I often thought maybe he'd starved to death, but he didn't, because some of her toes were missing. So he started eating her toes. So as much as your dog loves you, if it needs sustenance, it will eat you. The last one I'll talk about is, which one was it now? We did a wellness check on another college student, and when I walked into his bedroom, he was handcuffed. He had handcuffed himself to the bed, and he had a giant metal canister of nitrogen. I think it was nitrogen. And then he had duct taped a hose with a mask to suffocate himself. I've never seen a human so purple. He was so purple. Probably from the gas. But he had died, and his family really, I don't think they gave a shit, it seemed like. His parents were rich. Long story short, I got his drum kit, and it was awesome. In fact, I got the bed too. I didn't take the mattress, but it was a really nice bed, and I put it in my guest room in my house. And I don't think I've ever really said that openly, but anybody who slept at my house 10, 15 years ago, that wooden bed, if you would have looked really carefully on the headboard part, there were little indentations of handcuffs. Man, it was a nice bed, man. It was before IKEA. It was hard to come by. Me and Adriana were struggling at the time, so we needed a guest bed, and there was nothing wrong with it. Wiped it down, and, you know, I don't believe in bad juju, so. Somebody said the other day that they had felt like today, modern times, is getting bad. It's like, it's insinuating that modern times are some of the worst times to be alive kind of thing. Like, it's getting really bad, watch the news, yada yada. And I sat and thought about that for a second, and it's nowhere near. Actually, it's the opposite. The best time to be alive as a human being is 2025. Why? There's less wars, modern medicine. I mean, look at child deaths, right? Child deaths now are a big deal. Back in the 1800s, 1700s, 1500s, they were commonplace. Women would die all the time giving birth. Boys would die at 14. I mean, you had tuberculosis, polio, all types of stuff back then that you don't have now. It may seem like it's worse now, or it may seem like it's worse now than it was when you were growing up. But, you don't see as many kids riding bikes around anymore. Somebody once, I made that comment, somebody said, oh yeah, it's because of all the pedophiles and stuff. There's no more pedophiles now than there was back then. It's just they're more visible now. And, if you want to find them, you'll find them online. But at least now there's Amber Alerts and stuff. So, got to thinking, what was the worst time to be alive? And I found a diary entry by a woman named Beverly Foreman. And she wrote this diary entry in the year 1349 of our Lord. And I'm going to read it to you. It says, Dear Diary, it has reached the nearby village. I do hope this disease does... I do hope the disease does not reach our nunnery. All sorts of things are going on in my head. Are my parents all right? Has the world actually come to an end? Will everybody die soon? Now a restless fear has dwelt in my mind. The time has come to realize that the Black Plague has reached our village. I was only at the nunnery when I found out that my very own sister Anne had been sick. Why? Why does it have to be my little sister, O Lord? How has she disappointed you? I spent my entire life worshiping you and praying with her. She does not deserve to have this disease, this pestilence. Poor Anne. She started off with a headache, vomiting, and a fever. It was after all this when it got even worse and had large black dots under her armpit, and her body was covered with black spots. Have mercy, God, please. I cannot watch my sister suffer for another day, this badly. Elder Sister Miriam decided to lock Anne in a dirty old shed at the back. She says it's the only way to stop the plague from spreading. How dare she lock her own sister up like that? I'm not sure if this was her actual sister or she's saying sister, like meaning a fellow nun. I think it's her actual sister that was also a nun, I believe. Where was I? No one was allowed to go and see Anne. The poor girl had to stay there all alone in a dark, smelly place. It seems like I will have to satisfy God myself by becoming a flagellant. If whipping myself will stop my sister's pain, I shall do it. Then, it appears 3 days later, Dear Diary, I tried, but it only seems to get worse. While Sister Miriam left for a while, we hurried to give Anne treatment. Rotten treacle did not work, nor did the vinegar and water treatment. I never felt this bad before. I went to the old shed and saw my beautiful little sister lying face down on the dirt floor, now sleeping in heavenly peace, not breathing. I watched her leave in complete desolation. 6 days later. Dear Diary, today my throat was sore, and as I would change garments, I noticed there is a large lump underneath my left armpit. My left hand fingertip appears to be turning slightly blue as well. Why have you forsaken me? Am I the next to have this disease? That was the last diary entry. She, from the research I tried to do, looking up with the little information I have, I 90% chance she was taken out by Black Death. If you lived in the 1300s, the modern mind can't even fathom how bad it was to be living during the bubonic plague. It swept through Europe so fast, and you would have heard, if you were a woman washing clothes down by the well, you would have heard women gossiping about, oh, did you hear the pest? They didn't call it the Black Death. It was called the pestilence at first. You would have heard like, oh, did you hear the pestilence? Hit the town of blah blah blah. Which would have been 30 miles north of where you were. I mean, you lived in a time where 90% of the people would have lived and died their entire lives within 10 miles of where they were born. And if the plague was left on its own, it wouldn't have spread as quickly. But during this time, the Mongols were doing a siege on the city of Coffee, and the Black Death, bubonic plague, came out of the Asian steppe. It is believed. So the Mongol army was dropping dead quicker than they could resupply soldiers. So they gave up the siege. But before they left, they decided to implement the very first instance of biological warfare in recorded history. And they would take the plague victims, their fellow soldiers, and put them on the catapults and launch them into the city. Putrefied bodies come crashing down, splattering. After they left, Coffee was hit by the plague pretty hard. But before that, after the Mongols left, people escaped. And they went to Italy. And that really sped up the Black Death coming through Europe. So if it's a Monday, imagine every human being from when you were born till now, imagine every person you've ever known. By Friday, half of them are dead. So some villages it wiped out 90% of the population, some 40, some 60. It's hard to get real accurate numbers. It was a time when the only information you could really reach out and try to get would have been from the church. Illiteracy was high. You kind of relied upon the priest and reverends to give you the word. So a lot of people, instantly went to prayer until the Pope died. Once the Pope died of Black Death, people went apeshit. Naturally, like most times when humanity is looking at something that's an unpromising fate, we tend to become the worst versions of ourselves. So naturally, we start blaming the Jews, burning them at the stake, and then you'd have groups of people like Beverly here that decided, well, it has to be God's anger, so they would self-mutilate and walk around village to village and whipping themselves. You didn't know if the world was ending. So many people died that they would go around and pick up bodies like they do recycling nowadays. And if you happened to show signs, or anybody in your family happened to show signs of the plague, you were all boarded up in that home. So whether you would have gotten it or not, almost certainly you would have gotten it. There's some really creepy stories I read where after 3 weeks they would unboard the windows and door, and then they'd go in and they would find these putrefied corpses everywhere, and then in the corner they would see the whites of a child's eyes still alive. He happened to be immune to it, and some people were. Brutally scary. It's one reason why the plague doctor mask, I'll show you. It's one reason why I think this is one of the most hauntingly scary images throughout history. If you would have saw this guy coming down the road, you knew it was here. And people back then believed in miasmic thinking. They believed that you had 4 humors in the body. I think it was yellow bile, black bile, phlegm, and urine. Or no, it was yellow bile, black bile, blood, and urine, I believe. And if one of those were off balance, that would explain any health concerns, from headaches to sicknesses. They also believed that bad smells passed disease. So they would pack this right here. This would have been lead. This isn't historically accurate, but they would have packed herbs and spices in the nose to keep these guys from smelling that bad smell. It didn't work. A lot of plague doctors died as well. But they ran out of places to bury them. They were just when it hit London, they I'll put it on Joey. When it hit London, they ran out of burial places, so they just started dumping them into the Thames River. I mean, it was... When I was in Italy, I saw a cathedral, kind of beautiful from one side, and then you kept walking, you look back, and you see the whole side was unfinished. And I asked the guy, I said, why did he never finish that? And he said, Black Death. So, I mean, the Black Death, it's wiped out all your workers. You couldn't do nothing. In fact, it had an effect afterwards. It really brought the workforce down. So salaries or wages went up because, and you could pick and choose your job for the first time probably in your life and make a decent wage because of it. Because it killed everybody. I mean, so anybody that tells you that, the end times are near and there's signs all around you and it's real bad to be alive right now, either they're trying to scare you for whatever reason, for whatever they're wanting their message to hit, how they want their message to hit you is the reason why they're creating that narrative, or they don't know anything about history. Because, as an example, my daughter had a sore throat last week, and she went to within 24 hours, made the call, went to the pharmacy, boom, she had a Z-pack of antibiotics. And I asked her, I said, do you know what people would have given you or done for you just to get one of these pills in the 1300s to save their child? And it would have, who knew a little bit of bread mold would have battled against the one thing that almost wiped out our species, bread mold. Go figure. So recently, in the past probably 10 years, I've started to notice how crappy movies are coming out of Hollywood. There's always been bad movies, but the amount of remakes they're making now for no reason, and I'm not even talking about the woke stuff, which is bad enough. I'm talking about, like, all right, so a couple years ago there was Winnie the Pooh, which was a horror movie. And then recently I saw Popeye the Slayer Man. And it's just like, okay, what film studio gets this script on their desk and says, let's make it, right? Even if it's a low-budget movie, it still costs money. It's still a gamble. It's still an investment. Somebody once told me like 90% of all scripts end up just sitting in a pile on somebody's desk. It's like Hollywood is so ass backwards, and there's so many things that they could make a decent movie on, original ideas. Which leads me to my case. I would argue the second most influential human being to ever live on planet Earth was Gaius Julius Caesar. Why? Why second? Why him? Because I sat and thought about it. I gave the first spot to Jesus Christ simply for the fact that his influence went across the entire world. There's just no doubting the influence there. Can't compete with that. But why Caesar? If it was not for Caesar, there wouldn't have been an imperial Rome. Rome would have stayed as a republic ran by the Senate, and almost certainly would have fell apart. If that would have happened, you would have had Germanic tribes, the Celts, Gauls, Slavs. Our Western world would not resemble anything near as it does now. You'd be amazed at how many things the average human being does in their daily life that is a direct link to ancient Rome. And Caesar's life was, not only was he the second most influential human being ever, but the only real movie about him is there's a couple made in the 50s, and you have Shakespeare's play, but I'm talking about a biopic or biopic, whatever. Maybe in like the style of 300, right? That'd be awesome. But not only was he the most second influential person ever, but his life is incredibly fascinating. He was, the Julii family had money, they had status, but his dad, I forget exactly how, but his dad pissed it away somehow and then ended up dying. So Julius Caesar was the man of the house at a very young age. And they didn't really have any, they had a name but no money. And you're talking about a guy that was kidnapped as a young man, and would play, during his captive time, he would play Ludus, and Ludus is a Roman board game, and cards and dominoes and stuff with his captors, joking that, the ransom's not enough. But he would jokingly tell them, like, when I am free, I'm going to come back here and crucify every one of you. And of course, they blew it off. And, when he was released, rather than do what 90% of people would do, just thank God you're home and move on with your life. No, he went and got his buddies in a boat and went back, and he crucified them all and got the ransom back. Well, he cut their throats before he crucified them, he says in his autobiography, to show him mercy. So he struggles with these small, odd jobs throughout his life. Then he starts to really focus on being an orator, a good speaker, and he gets these lower level government jobs, positions, and he works his way up, and he's at this point he's a masterful speaker, and he starts networking and gets not gonna get too into detail, but he joins the triumvirate with Crassus and Pompey the Great, and he gets elected consul, and Pontifex Maximus, I think it's called, the leader of the Roman religion at that time, and then he gets stationed in Gaul as a legionnaire commander, and he didn't come from a military background, but he picked it up really well, and he was a great tactician. In fact, he was whipping so much ass in Gaul that the Senate started thinking like, oh, this guy's getting too much power. I mean, now he's rich, now, so they started trumping up charges, calling for Caesar to disband his army, saying, look, you pushed this too far, and we didn't tell you to do this, and so they told him to disband his army and come back to Rome to face charges. Well, Caesar knew that was going to be never go in his favor. And Gaul at that time was full of different Gaelic tribes. And like Native Americans, they were always kind of warring with each other for one thing or another. And when the Romans started decimating them, a guy named Vercingetorix, a Gaelic chieftain, started kind of saying, okay, guys, we need to stop fighting amongst each other. The Rome is at our door. We need to band together. And they did. Long story short, Caesar outmaneuvered them and got them to winter was coming, so the Vercingetorix figured that the Romans would pull off and wait through winter, but Caesar doubled back and caught them in Alesia, in modern day France. Alesia was this fortress, Gaelic fortress, that was up on a hill. And as the image shows, you can see how it's kind of up on a hill. Caesar had this surrounded, and he told his men to build a wall. Chop down trees, let's build a wall 20 to 28 miles around, and then put the garrisons and watchtowers every so many feet, essentially trapping the Gauls inside. And Vercingetorix got a message out to additional Gauls, 60,000+, which would have made it, I think, damn near 5-1, outnumbering the Romans. And when Caesar's scouts told him this, instead of pulling off, he had his soldiers build another wall, 30 miles around, essentially creating a ring that the Romans were now stuck in. So you had Vercingetorix and his few thousand people in Alesia in the fort, and then you had Caesar and his men in the ring, and then you had 60,000+ auxiliary troops coming. And Caesar stayed calm, and he won. He won. For sake of time, I'll get down these rabbit holes and get too technical and too detailed, but it was a stroke of military genius. And what it did was it basically won the Roman Empire. It gained them 1/3 additional territory. I mean, if you look on the map, you can see what Rome had before the conquest of Gaul, and then what they had after the conquest of Gaul. So now the Senate was really, they needed for him to disband his army. And I would have loved to have been a fly in the wall to see Caesar work out what to do. do I go back and have my fate sealed? Or do I do something almost unheard of? Do I march my legions on the very city that I serve? And we all know the story of the Rubicon, let the die be cast. Whether or not he ever said it, probably not. But, he ends up going back, and through a few skirmishes with Pompey and fast forward, he wins, and he becomes, for the first time, dictator. And, history paints Caesar as a power-hungry dictator. But history is often written by your enemies, which in Caesar's case, 100% is. I'm not saying Caesar was not vain at times or ruthless at times, but he wasn't a power-hungry dictator. What he was he was fighting against, the Senate had gotten so out of whack. It was the aristocracy of Rome. It was Rome's rich and elite making rules for the rich and elite. And where does that sound familiar? And Caesar simply wanted to consolidate their power and give it back to the people. And they didn't like it. I went to Italy a few years ago with my grandma, and where Caesar's ashes, where his monument used to be, Romans cremated their dead, where his ashes used to be, it was loaded with flowers and wreaths in like 2022 or whatever. The place where Plaza de Argentina, I think it's called, where he was assassinated, had giant wreaths and roses there too. So people today still pay homage to Julius Caesar. He also is one of the reasons that Augustus was put into power. And I would argue Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, was the perfect man at the perfect time to complete a perfect job. And he brought on Pax Romana and really kind of set the standard of Rome's long run. I mean, Rome was, if you look back at history, take out prehistory, just kind of in recorded history. I remember looking up some numbers once. I believe 1/3 of our entire history was ruled by the Roman Empire. Like they ran the show in one way, shape, or form for damn near 14 to 1800 years. So the United States has been a world power since what, the 1940s? Rome set the Western world on to be what it is today. We are all Romans. In one way, shape, or form, we all have something from Rome. But many of us just don't pay attention to it. But Caesar, he was killed simply for, the movie would be so interesting because even if it's not historically accurate, there's some stories like Tacitus or Pliny the Elder that says, Caesar talks about his wife, or not Caesar, Brutus talks about Caesar's mistress having a nightmare the morning before he went to the Senate meeting when he was assassinated, that she feared him leaving, and that he also a few days beforehand had passed a soothsayer, and the soothsayer told him, be weary of the Ides of March. The Ides of March meaning the middle part of March, and he had saw that soothsayer a day or two or the day of when he was walking back to the Senate, and kind of laughed and told her, hey, the Ides of March are here. He kind of just shrugged his shoulders like, hey, I'm good. And she replied, yeah, but they're not gone. And whether or not that was actually said, I don't know. But he was stabbed on the Senate floor And out of all the battles he went through and all the adversities he went through, he was killed in Rome by Romans. It's insane. Et tu, Brute, never was said. Do you know what Julius Caesar's last words were? Oh, oh, oh. I mean, he got stabbed like 20, 30 times. I mean, there's no poetic looking into a mistress's son's eyes and saying, oh, and you too, Brute? Nah. Anyways, the senators, conspirators, they thought Rome would cheer. They'd open up the doors and freedom, you liberated us from a dictator. That wasn't the case. The people, you did what? And they started killing the conspirators. It really backfired on them. And the movie could leave off right when Mark Antony and Octavian or Augustus started battling it out for the empire, and it would just be a fantastic movie. I mean, why isn't there a modern movie of Julius effing Caesar? Come on, Mel Gibson, get on it. So anyways, I'm going to wrap this up. Don't want to make these too long, but thank you for watching Down the Mine Shaft with Triz, me. Feel free to leave a comment. You can reach me if you want to email me. It's downthemineshaft@gmail.com. I will be live streaming this eventually, and like I said, about once a month I may have a guest or a co-host with me to kind of bounce some things off and stuff. But I don't know, I just wanted to kind of just do something where just free thought, just hear me ramble about nonsense, and I hope it's interesting. So feel free to make any suggestions in the comments, or subscribe, and I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Keep me from myself so I can do no wrong. I can't blame no one else. I've never been that strong. Has led to nowhere. Now beyond the blame. Back down on my knees. Again it calls my name. Here I am alone again. Distorted everything I see. Tell my soul that wrecked my life. Alone again with me. This war inside my head, tempting me with lies. Annoyed by reality, with this reflection I despise. What have I become? I never meant to harm. Myself is who I hate. Stick this needle in my arm. Here I am alone again. Distorted everything I see. Tell my soul that wrecked my life. Alone again with me. Lost inside my head, feel this empty void. The person that you once knew has forever been destroyed. My hollow, empty soul, this fragile being that I've made. Please forgive the pain I've caused. I cannot be saved.